In 1977, the United States received an offer, or to be more precise, a blackmail attempt. A message was sent directly to the White House from the other side of the world, delivering a cold ultimatum. Pay me $100 million or I'll poison your country. He wasn't bluffing. At the peak of his power, this man controlled a volume of heroin greater than any single individual in human history. 40% of the product flowing through American streets originated in his jungle laboratories. 1 in 4 overdoses in the US could be traced back to his supply chain. Emergency rooms from Los Angeles to New York were overflowing with the deadly commodity bearing his brand. But here is the twisted irony of history. The CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, indirectly helped create him. Washington spent 2 decades, placed a $2 million bounty on his head, issued federal indictments, and mobilized the largest multinational drug sting in history to destroy him. And the result? He died of old age in a soft bed inside a luxury villa, surrounded by family and a massive fortune. He never spent a single day in an American cell. How did an illiterate jungle warlord beat a superpower? And why was he completely untouchable? Welcome to the Golden Triangle. The Golden Triangle, 1950. Where the borders of Burma, Laos, and Thailand collide in a tangle of treacherous mountains and tropical jungle. Here, at that time, national borders were nothing more than meaningless lines on a map. There was no international law, no social order. There was only one language: power. To understand the monster that America would later face, we must go back to 1950. Power here did not belong to the local governments, but to uninvited guests, the remnants of the Chinese Kuomintang army. After losing to Mao Zedong in the Chinese Civil War in 1949, over 12,000 Kuomintang soldiers fled across the southern border, washing up in the mountainous Shan state of Burma. They were stranded, they were stateless, they were desperate, but they had a secret sponsor. As the Cold War began to escalate, Washington saw a geopolitical opportunity in this ragtag army. The CIA wanted to turn them into an anti-communist outpost on China's southern flank, a guerrilla force that could harass Mao's borders. The CIA secretly established an air bridge, supplying modern weapons, gold, and military advisors to nurture this force. But there was a logistical problem. To maintain an army of 12,000 men in the deep jungle, CIA care packages were not enough. The Kuomintang remnants needed an autonomous revenue stream, and they found it in the flower that grew all over these highlands, the opium poppy. The CIA, in its effort to stop the red wave, inadvertently established the first industrial-scale opium transport infrastructure in the region. They looked the other way as the Kuomintang controlled the cultivation and trade of narcotics in exchange for food and guns. A deal with the devil, tolerating organized crime to serve political ends. And it was during these US-sponsored military training sessions that a teenager of half Shan, half Chinese descent was watching from the sidelines. He wasn't a soldier, he was just an errand boy. But he had a photographic memory. His name was Zhang Qifu. He memorized everything: how to strip a rifle blindfolded, how to set an ambush in the dense jungle, how to read the terrain to gain a tactical advantage. And most importantly, he learned how to turn violence into profit, and profit into power. The CIA was training their future nightmare without even realizing it. By his early 20s, Zhang Qifu had established his own private militia. But unlike hundreds of other petty warlords scrapping for crumbs in the jungle, Zhang had a different mindset. He didn't think like a bandit. He thought like a CEO. He engaged in systems thinking. Most gangs at the time operated on a protection racket model, taxing opium farmers or providing armed escort for major dealers. Zhang Qifu didn't want to be a hired gun. He saw the waste in petty competition. He wanted to control the entire supply chain, from the poppy fields on the high mountains, to the refineries, to the smuggling routes through the jungle, and finally to the foreign distributors. In 1963, he made a genius political move that would define his career. The Burmese government at the time was struggling with ethnic rebel groups. Zhang Qifu approached the government with an offer. He would transform his private army into a local militia force, known as the Ka Kwe Ye, to help the government fight the rebels. In exchange, he didn't ask for a salary. He wanted the right to use government roads and infrastructure to conduct business. The Burmese government agreed. They had just handed a future drug lord a get-out-of-jail-free card. Zhang Qifu could now traffic opium legally under military protection, passing through checkpoints without being searched. Within 2 years, his force was better armed than the Burmese regular army. He bought weapons from the black market with tons of cash. He recruited soldiers and trained them with the iron discipline he had scavenged from American advisors years earlier. Locals whispered his name in fear. But Zhang's ambition didn't stop at Burma. He wanted the throne of the entire Golden Triangle. And that led to one of the strangest events in military history, the Opium War of 1967. In the spring of 1967, Zhang Qifu decided to challenge his former masters, the Kuomintang remnants, who had dominated the Golden Triangle for 15 years. He organized a massive caravan, the likes of which had never been seen. 300 mules, stretching nearly a kilometer, protected by 500 elite soldiers. Each mule carried raw opium bricks, worth a fortune on the international market. This army snaked its way through the border trails into Laos. This wasn't just a trade run, it was a declaration of war. He wanted to break the Kuomintang monopoly. It was a bold move, perhaps suicidal. At Ban Quan, a small village on the banks of the Mekong River, hell opened up. When Zhang's convoy arrived, the Kuomintang was waiting in ambush. Gunfire erupted from 3 sides, but neither faction expected a third player. General Uwana Ratikone of the Royal Lao Army, who also coveted this shipment, mobilized his troops to surround both sides. And then, ruthlessly, the Lao Air Force arrived. T-28 bombers dropped napalm on the combat zone, turning the jungle into a sea of fire. It was a chaotic 3-way slaughter for 16 tons of opium. When the smoke cleared, Zhang Qifu had lost everything. The shipment was incinerated or seized by the Lao army. And ironically, General Ratikone later quietly sold that very same opium back into the market. Zhang's army disintegrated. He fled into the jungle with empty hands. His reputation of invincibility collapsed in a single afternoon. The bad luck didn't stop there. In October 1969, the Burmese government decided that Zhang Qifu had become too troublesome and had outlived his usefulness. He was arrested at an airport while on a business trip. The charge, treason and communicating with rebel groups. 35 years old, shackled and thrown into a dark cell in Mandalay. His empire was finished. He would rot in prison. At least, that's what the world believed. But they didn't know that prison was exactly where Zhang Qifu would evolve. 5 years in prison. For most crime bosses, solitary confinement means the death of a career. Subordinates scatter, territory is seized, the spirit is broken. But Zhang Qifu didn't waste time mourning. He read. He studied Chinese history, specifically The Art of War by Sun Tzu. In the darkness of Mandalay prison, he distilled a philosophy that would define the underworld for the next 30 years. No eternal friends, no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. He entered prison as a warlord who acted on impulse. He would leave as a master strategist. Outside the prison walls, his most loyal lieutenants had not given up. In 1973, they executed the most audacious rescue plan in Southeast Asian history. They kidnapped 2 Soviet doctors working at a hospital in Burma. Why Soviet doctors? Because this was the height of the Cold War. The Soviet Union was a superpower. The message to the Burmese government was simple. Release our leader, or you will have to explain to Moscow why their citizens were executed. The Burmese government was cornered. They didn't fear a drug gang, but they feared a diplomatic crisis with the USSR. In 1974, after 5 years of captivity, Zhang Qifu walked out of prison in a secret exchange. He immediately vanished into the Thai border jungle, and this time, he underwent his most spectacular transformation. He shed his Chinese name, Zhang Qifu. He took a new name, Khun Sa, which in the Shan language means Prince Prosperous. And this version of Khun Sa had a weapon 1,000 times more powerful than guns: political marketing. He declared to the world, "I am not a drug lord. I am a freedom fighter for the Shan people." It was the perfect cover. The Shan people, long neglected, impoverished, and oppressed by the central government, saw a savior in Khun Sa. He used opium money to build roads, schools, hospitals, and clinics. Khun Sa had discovered the ultimate secret of power. Wrap your crimes in a flag of righteousness, and people will be willing to die to protect you. They didn't see the heroin factories, they saw hope. Back to 1977, when Khun Sa made that $100 million offer to the US. When the White House refused and labeled it terrorist blackmail, Khun Sa simply smiled. In reality, the offer was never meant to be accepted. It was a message, a warning. If America wouldn't pay him to stop selling, America would pay with the blood of its citizens. In the 1980s, Khun Sa launched an industrial revolution in drug production. Previously, street heroin was often cut with impurities, low potency. Khun Sa hired the best chemists to establish large-scale processing facilities right in the jungle. They created number 4 heroin, China White. Purity levels hit 90 to 99%. This was the highest grade, the most potent, and the most addictive product on the market. The statistics tell a horrifying story. Before Khun Sa, the Golden Triangle was a minor player in the global market. Under Khun Sa, by the late 80s, the Golden Triangle supplied 80% of the heroin in New York City. Opium production skyrocketed from a few hundred tons to over 2,500 tons annually. Khun Sa built a true narco-state at his headquarters in Ho Mong. He had a standing army of 20,000 men, the Mong Thai Army, equipped with shoulder-fired SAM-7 missiles to shoot down helicopters. He had satellite television, hydroelectric power, schools, and even a golf course. In 1988, when a brave Western reporter hiked up the mountain to interview him about poisoning American youth, Khun Sa replied with the cold detachment of a ruthless businessman, "I am merely a businessman. I sell a product. If the Americans don't buy from me, they will buy from someone else. Don't blame the merchant when your customers seek their own death. His public arrogance enraged the U.S. The Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, decided it was time to end this game at any cost. By the early 90s, Khun Sa's empire began to wobble. Not because of bombs, but because of economic isolation and multi-front pressure. The DEA launched Operation Tiger Trap. They realized they couldn't defeat Khun Sa in the jungle, his home turf. So they attacked his wallet. DEA agents coordinated with Thai police to arrest a series of middlemen and money launderers in Bangkok, Hong Kong, and Singapore. The export gateways were sealed. Simultaneously, a new power rose. The United Wa State Army, UWSA, covertly backed by the Burmese military, began aggressively attacking Khun Sa's territory to seize control of the drug market. By 1995, Khun Sa was cornered. 61 years old, his health failing from diabetes and high blood pressure. Internally, his Shan subordinates began to mutiny, realizing he cared only about money, not their independence. Externally, the WA Army and the government were tightening the noose. A U.S. federal indictment was hanging over his head. Everyone expected a Hollywood Scarface ending. The drug lord holed up in his bunker, firing his machine gun until the last bullet, dying in a blaze of glory. But remember his prison philosophy: no eternal enemies. Khun Sa was always one move ahead. On January 5th, 1996, the world was stunned. Khun Sa didn't surrender to the Americans. He didn't fight to the death. He surrendered to the Burmese government, his sworn enemy of the last 20 years. He had cut a secret deal. He would disband the Mong Thai army and hand over all territory to the government. In exchange, first he kept his entire fortune, hundreds of millions of dollars. Second, he was granted a luxury villa in the capital, Yangon, with military guards. And the most important clause, the Burmese government guaranteed he would never be extradited to the United States. Washington screamed in vain. They cited international law. They threatened sanctions. They leveraged the bounty. But the Burmese military junta, already isolated and sanctioned by the West, had no reason to help America. They simply said, no. Khun Sa had found the only loophole in the world order, hiding in the shadow of a dictatorship that hated the U.S. just as much as he did. So, how did Khun Sa spend his final years? He became a respectable businessman. He laundered his dirty money into real estate, a bus transport company, and ruby mines. He lived a quiet life, playing golf and sipping tea in his garden. He passed away on October 26, 2007, from natural causes, at the age of 73. No handcuffs, no trial, not a single day in a U.S. prison. The story of Khun Sa is not just the biography of a criminal. It is a brutal lesson in geopolitics. It demonstrates that in the gray zones of international politics, justice does not always win. A smart monster who knows how to exploit the friction between superpowers can absolutely get away with murder. Khun Sa is dead, but the flow of heroin from the Golden Triangle never really stopped. It just changed management from Khun Sa to other rebel groups. The jungle trails he cut 50 years ago still bear the footprints of smugglers today. To create this in-depth analysis and ensure historical accuracy, we synthesized information from reputable sources that you can read to understand this complex picture better. First, The Politics of Heroin by Professor Alfred W. McCoy. This is considered the seminal work for anyone wanting to research the secret link between the CIA and global drug networks during the Cold War. The book provides detailed evidence of how political calculations inadvertently nurtured organized crime. Second, declassified reports from the DEA and U.S. Congress, 1989 to 1996. These documents provide factual data on opium production and the details of Operation Tiger Trap that the mass media at the time did not have full access to. It reveals the true scale of this underground economy. And third, archives from the Shan Herald Agency. To ensure objectivity and avoid a purely Western-centric view, we also referenced perspectives from the indigenous Shan people. To them, Khun Sa was a controversial figure, a drug trafficker, yes, but also the only one who brought infrastructure to their forgotten land. History is rarely black and white. Cross-referencing sources is the most important skill for us to approach the truth. If you found this video provided valuable knowledge and a new perspective, please leave a like and hit subscribe to support the channel in making more in-depth documentaries like this. Who or what historical event do you want us to analyze next? Let us know in the comments below. Goodbye, and see you next time.